Good evening, everyone. I'm Sever Davis, Associate Director of Design here at the RSA and Manager of the RSA Student Design Awards. It's my great pleasure to welcome you here this evening for this special event, celebrating the launch of the 2014-15 RSA Student Design Awards program in this, our 90th anniversary year. For those of you who may not know, the RSA Student Design Awards is a global curriculum and competition that challenges emerging designers to tackle pressing social, environmental, and economic issues through design thinking. Today, we formally launched the 2014-15 projects, and in the coming weeks and months, design students around the UK and around the world will work on these projects, and we hope that they will be empowered in finding new applications for their skills in the process. So to begin, could I ask you please to switch your mobile phones to silent? In addition, we're filming this evening's event and streaming live over the RSA website. So welcome to all of you joining us online. And a reminder that the hashtag is RSA Design if you'd like to get involved in the discussion on Twitter. Now it is my great pleasure to introduce this evening's guest speaker. Alistair Parvin is a designer with the award-winning architectural practice 00. He is co-founder of WikiHouse, an innovative open-source construction set, and in addition, he leads A Right to Build, an ongoing project addressing the economics of the housing crisis. He is a passionate advocate of citizen-led development in infrastructure, cities, neighborhoods, and tonight he is speaking on design and democracy. Given that the RSA Student Design Awards is all about encouraging the next generation to think about how they can apply their skills in new ways and the potential of design to benefit society, we could not have a more fitting speaker for this occasion. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Alistair Parvin.
Thank you very much indeed. I'd like to start by giving you my doctor's note. Which is, if I seem a bit fried or my slides are slightly chaotic in construction, it's because we've literally just spent a week building this thing outside Store Street. So if you'd like to go and review the evidence and be design critics, please do so. And please forgive me if I'm a bit incoherent this evening. You don't have to watch all of that. It took 8 days, and it was a team of about 8 volunteers, roughly speaking. We built that little house, so go and see it. So the problem with talking about the theme design and democracy is the second word, which is that it's a hugely misused term and gets very quickly tired without really thinking very deeply about democracy. And one of the reasons for this, of course, is that design needs to sell things, and it will use any word it needs to do so. So it's a lot easier to talk about the exact opposite, which is design and undemocracy. So this is not a blank page. This is a graph of who builds our homes in the UK, with everyone who built a home in 2006 along the bottom line and how many they built on the y-axis. And it doesn't even fit on the page. In that year, and pretty much every year since, more than 50% of our homes are made by just 10 companies, which is weird, right? And at the top of this graph, of course, you have this high peak, a tiny number of massive house-building companies. Then you have a kind of bulk in the middle of very small, much smaller house-building companies and residential social landlords. And at the very end, you have the lowly self-builder. And that kind of long tail graph is obviously very familiar to all of you. But of course, what's happening somewhere along that line is also a shift from professionals to amateurs, and that's very interesting. But given this is the case, it's very hard for us to say, oh, use terms like consultation. You know, it's a very kind of almost meaningless term now, these sorts of structures that we put in place in our democratic institutions. And I love this example. This is a motorway in China where the homeowner refused to sell their house, so they just built the motorway anyway. And the reason for this is that actually, since the Industrial Revolution, our basic model for how we develop cities hasn't really changed that much. Whether it was done by the state, whether it was done by the market, the basic model hasn't really changed that much, which is you are a consumer. And these projects can only be done by large professional well-capitalized organizations. So they'll take a plot of land, and the first thing they will do with that section of land is treat it like tabula rasa. They will clear it, both socially and politically and economically. And then we do this rather backwards process where and it's so obvious that we don't really think about it, where we get a single person in a suit, usually, with a single large chunk of capital, will apply to a single designer and procure a whole single monolithic project in one go. And of course, what you end up with are single monolithic neighborhoods. And sometimes you employ an architect to jiggle it up a bit and pretend that it wasn't all built at once. And then what you do is you submit this jiggled up drawings to a human being, because our planning system was designed before computers or the internet. So we submit it to a human being. And if you catch that human being in a good area on a good day, they'll say yes. But if you catch them on a bad day, they won't, or for a series of political reasons. So it's a highly corruptible system. I don't mean in a brown envelope way. I mean in a much more tacit way. And then you take a huge chunk of financial capital, and entirely through the monetary economy, you pay a contractor to build you this building. And the key thing is this, which is what they are building are not homes. They're actually financial assets. They're pieces of real estate. So an awful lot of what we call bad design in our cities is not bad design. It's actually very good design if your aim is to build a really profitable financial asset. And we operate in an inflating market, which we tend to celebrate. But actually, of course, an inflating market means that naturally your houses are going to get smaller and smaller. There is very little, and it's widely established and accepted by industry, that in an inflating market there is very little competition on quality. And it's amazing how often we beat these companies around the head for doing bad design or not being sustainable enough. Actually, they're just being completely logical, and they're serving their shareholders quite sensibly. And this is a real problem, because actually it means that we're trying to get public value, like addressing sustainability, from companies who fundamentally see all those things that we see as good about housing, quality, sustainability, flexibility, community, as costs. And, of course, what we end up with is A, saddled with mortgage debt, B, in socially isolating neighbourhoods. I sometimes think that these places could be designed to be hotels, permanent hotels, and we're all consumers. These are consumer neighbourhoods. This is not a place where you start a business. And that's not a diagram. We're literally building this. This isn't Eastern Bloc China. This is Stratford. This is the Olympic Park. And actually, it doesn't matter where you go or through what ideology around the world you look at, you find the same again and again and again. Development, fundamentally, is still seen as something done to, not done by citizens. And we just think that that's how it has to be. And the problem is that this is the model that, of course, we are exporting at a massive scale to an urbanizing world. So this is a place in Angola called Kiambi-Kiaxi. And it's a completely new city being made in the desert using Chinese financial capital. The amazing thing about this place is that it's built, and then for a long time it's completely empty. And because you need $70,000 just to buy a flat. It's a kind of non-place. It's a corpse of a place. And they pay cleaners and gardeners to walk around sort of doing these things. And the BBC journalist goes up to them and says, "Oh, what do you think of it here?" "Oh, it's really nice. There's no crime." And they say, "Well, where do you live?" I say, "Well, I live here." And that's happening again and again and again all the way around the world, is that actually the city of the future either already exists or it actually happens here. So when we talk about housing crisis, I mean, this is the most overused architectural presentations, I apologize. When we talk about housing crisis, we tend to say that's the housing crisis and that's the solution to the housing crisis. But actually, both of these are different articulations of the same housing crisis. It's just that one is being experienced as debt, which is what we're experiencing in the UK. Economically dead neighbourhoods, massively indebted people, sort of residents in those neighbourhoods, and very poor quality development. And on the right, something completely different. But the twist to this plot is that actually these were designed and procured as property, as things to sell, whereas these places, although a lot of it is actually designed and procured as places to live and work. That's another way of saying the same thing. The problem is this. which is that fundamentally our industrial economy, the tools that we had available, said to us that we could have infrastructure over here, but there's no way of doing infrastructure over here. We can have planning tools and legal institutions over here, but we can't have them over there. So behind this is this fundamental assumption about our industrial economy and the way that we produce things and the way we design things. And it basically works, stepping outside of architecture, in a pretty similar fundamental way, which is where a designer is a priest, probably in London or New York, wearing a roll-neck jumper behind a drawing board or an Apple Mac. And they produce a design and then they protect it. They copyright it, and then they send that recipe all the way around the world to where you can find the cheapest possible labor, where they make an object and they ship it all the way back again. This is why we love this fantastic John Maynard Keynes quote, we think it's him, which is, it's easier to ship recipes than cakes and biscuits, because that's not how we do things. This is what most of the design economy is basically built on. And at the end of it, you need a credit card, again, more debt to buy it on. So that is suddenly beginning to break. There's a series of things happening that mean that that's no longer the case. The first one is this one, which is suddenly the web is making it possible to share information, and information wants to be free. So lo and behold, someone creates a new way of sharing and not protecting that information. Open source licenses. Because it would probably, if you try and protect it, it's probably going to get nicked anyway. The second massive shift is this one, which is automation. And of course, this is a whole other interesting set of conversations in itself, the impact that automation is going to have on middle-class labor. But actually, fundamentally, we need this to happen at the same time. So we're seeing this shift from a small number of professional companies using skilled but fundamentally repetitive labor to the idea that actually everybody can have access to those tools now using a parametric automation tool that says, if this, then that. And then the third shift is the rise, or if you like, the opening up and releasing of digital manufacturing tools. I'll let this play. Like 3D printers. I mean, 3D printers are the most well-known ones. Obviously also includes machines like CNC machines. The thing we need to understand about, I'm getting ahead of the slides here. The thing we need to understand firstly about 3D printers is they weren't just invented, by the way. Their patents just expired. They were actually invented 30 years ago. The explosion we've had recently was to do with patents. And so suddenly this new paradigm emerges where actually now a designer can produce a design and actually share it with another design, and they can take it somewhere entirely around the world, and they can print it out locally. So we have this future where potentially design knowledge is incredibly shareable, and we can actually be much more efficient about not making the same mistake twice, but also production is much more local and distributed. And this has been termed the third industrial revolution, but it's going to have a massive, profound impact on the way that we potentially make things, and the question of, more importantly, who makes them. And so, to give a very brief outline to WikiHouse, that is exactly the kind of insight that we began to experiment with a few years ago. This is where I show a website that we haven't built yet, so if any of you are web developers and want to help us build it, please shout. The fundamental idea is to make a central commons platform for the sharing of design solutions. Now, at the moment, it's a particular kind of house, but of course, that could be almost anything. And use very simple available tools. At the moment, we're using SketchUp because it's one of the simplest and most available there is, to share models from which you can generate or then share a complete, perfect set of manufacturing information that anybody can take freely and replicate anywhere around the world. And using a machine, in this case a CNC machine, and the standard sheet material like plywood, effectively print out the parts to almost anything, but in this case, a house. And those parts have effectively got embedded huge amounts of knowledge and huge amounts of complexity, and they're all numbered. And so you can take this kit on site and build it very, very quickly. So the power of these tools of complexity is effectively they allow us those things about assembly, but also frameworks. You can do it house. Of course, we're creating this open domain for energy and are affordable. Not just people think of WikiHouse, they immediately pull off this remarkable feat of not only dealing with this exploding world population, but completely reversing us, getting us off fossil fuels before they run out, without us